He was late for a meeting, phone buzzing non-stop, when he spotted her barefoot, hair wild, standing by the marble lobby doors, with a crumpled envelope pressed to her chest. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there silent, eyes locked on him, like she'd been waiting her whole life. The guards moved to escort her out, until she whispered one sentence that stopped everyone cold. He reached for the letter, confused, annoyed, curious. Then he saw his name written in delicate shaking handwriting. And before he could say a word, the little girl said something that shattered everything he thought he knew. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you silently, arranging everything then right now, leave a comment saying Amen below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. The marble lobby of Turner Technologies gleamed under the soft morning light of a Boston spring. Outside, the city was waking slowly, the air crisp but touched with the promise of warmth. Trees along the Charles River were budding their tender green leaves, whispering of new beginnings. Yet inside the towering glass building, life moved with the usual sharp pace, heels, clicking phones, buzzing, and men in tailored suits rushing toward elevators without a second glance at anything small or fragile. At the center of it all stood a little girl, no taller than the reception desk, her small hands clutching a wrinkled envelope to her chest as if it were a treasure map. Emily Dawson was only 7, but her blue eyes carried the weight of someone much older. She had taken 2 buses across the city that morning, guided only by her mother's handwritten note and a determination that seemed far too strong for such a delicate frame. "Excuse me, Mum," Emily whispered, standing on tiptoe to meet the gaze of the receptionist. Linda Cooper, who had spent over a decade welcoming investors and executives into Turner Technologies, froze at the sight. Children never came through those glass doors. Something about this girl's trembling voice and the way she held out that worn envelope stirred Linda's instincts as a mother. "It's very, very important," Emily said, her voice breaking slightly, but her hand steady as she lifted the letter higher. "My mummy wrote it. She said the man in charge has to read it today because she might not be able to write any more letters." Linda's throat tightened. She glanced at the envelope where a name was written in elegant but shaky handwriting. Michael Turner, CEO. Urgent and personal. For a moment, the receptionist hesitated, torn between protocol and compassion. Michael Turner was not a man to be disturbed easily. Known for his brilliance in technology and ruthless precision in business, he had built a reputation as Boston's unshakable titan. People whispered about how cold he was, how distant, how he lived inside walls so high that no one could ever climb them. But looking into Emily's pleading eyes, Linda picked up the phone and dialed the direct line she had never dared to use without permission. "Mr. Turner," she said, her voice unsteady, "there's a little girl here. She insists on giving you a letter. I think you should see her." 40 floors above Michael Turner sat in his office, surrounded by glass walls that reflected the skyline. At 34, he was the face of an empire, but his world was a fortress of numbers, contracts, and silence. He rarely noticed the harbour beyond his window, let alone the spring blossoms lining the streets below. When Linda's voice reached him, irritation sparked until she added, "She seems different, sir. Please." Michael rubbed his temples, exhaling sharply. Against his better judgment, he agreed. Minutes later, the elevator chimed, and a small figure stepped into his domain. Emily's golden hair caught the light as she approached his desk with hesitant steps. The room seemed to hold its breath. "Are you the boss man?" she asked softly. Michael Turner, a man who thought he had nothing left in life to surprise him, looked into eyes so piercingly blue and familiar that his world tilted in an instant, and everything he believed about his life began to crack. Michael Turner stared at the little girl standing in the middle of his expansive office. She looked so small, so impossibly out of place among the sharp angles and muted greys of corporate power. But it wasn't her size that caught him off guard. It was her face. More specifically, it was the way that face mirrored his own. The same icy blue eyes, the same strong brow, the subtle dimple on the left cheek that revealed itself when she tried to hide a nervous smile. Michael had seen that expression before, but only in old family photographs, ones of himself as a child. The envelope in her tiny hands trembled slightly as she held it toward him. "My mummy said you have to read this right now," she said, her voice fragile but determined. "It's about something really, really important." Michael stood slowly still, trying to catch his breath. He walked around his desk and knelt in front of her. "What's your name?" he asked, softer than he'd intended. "Emily. Emily Dawson." That name hit him like a cold wind. He took the letter carefully, his hands brushing against hers. The paper felt damp, not from the spring air, but from the sweat of a little girl who had carried the weight of a secret all the way across the city. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of stationery that smelled faintly of lavender, so familiar it nearly buckled his knees. His eyes locked on the first line. "My dearest Michael." It was written in a handwriting he hadn't seen in 8 years, but could still recognize in an instant. Claire. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years, hadn't let himself think of her for more than fleeting moments in the late hours of the night when the city was quiet and success felt emptier than it should. As he read, the words struck him like hammer blows. 8 years ago, we shared something beautiful, and from that something even more precious was born our daughter Emily. Michael's breath caught. He kept reading even as his hands trembled. Claire explained everything their last night together. The pregnancy she hadn't told him about, the pain of being shut out when lies tore them apart. She had tried to contact him, but someone had intercepted her messages. She had believed he didn't want to hear from her. Now she was dying. Cancer. Stage 4. Time was running out, and she had no one left. No parents, no siblings, just a little girl who deserved to know her father and needed one more than ever. Michael looked up from the letter, his throat thick. Emily was watching him with those familiar eyes, trying to be brave. Is my mummy going to be okay?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I don't know," Michael replied truthfully, "but I'm going to find out." He rose to his feet and walked to his desk, pressing a button on the intercom. "Linda," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Clear my schedule for the day. All of it. Yes, sir." He turned back to Emily. "Would you like to call your mummy? Let her know you're safe." Emily nodded quickly, her shoulders relaxing for the first time since she entered the building. Michael handed her his phone, and she dialed a number from memory. Her fingers shook, but her voice was clear. "Hi, Mummy. I made it. He's here." He read the letter. Yes, he's being nice. Michael watched as Emily smiled, listened, then handed the phone back. She wants to talk to you, Emily said. He took the phone. Claire, he said softly. There was a long pause, and then her voice, raspy, thinner than he remembered, but unmistakable, came through the line. Michael. I wasn't sure if I'd ever hear your voice again. He swallowed hard. I have a lot of questions. But first, I'm coming to see you. You don't have to, I do, he interrupted. Today. When the call ended, he turned back to Emily. Let's go. Before they left, he knelt again and looked her in the eye. You were very brave today, he said. I don't know if I've ever met someone as brave as you. Emily smiled. Mommy says being brave means doing the right thing even when you're scared. Michael felt something shift inside his chest. A warmth he hadn't known he was missing. On the ride to Claire's apartment, Emily sat in the back of his sleek black SUV, her legs swinging, her gaze curious as the city passed by. You're really tall, she noted. Michael chuckled. I've been told that before. Do you know how to make pancakes? I can learn, he replied. Emily grinned. Good. I like chocolate chip ones. When they arrived at the small walk-up apartment on the southern edge of Boston, Michael was struck by how modest it was. Clean, but worn. A place where someone had done their best with very little. Claire opened the door slowly, her frame thinner, her face paler than he remembered. But her eyes still had that same quiet strength, the same calm that used to steady him when nothing else could. Hi, she said. And just like that, 8 years of pained silence and unanswered questions stood between them. But so did their daughter. Michael looked at Claire, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Claire Dawson hadn't seen Michael Turner in 8 years yet. The moment he stepped through the doorway of her modest apartment, it was as if time folded in on itself. He looked older, more defined, more distant, but his presence filled the space, just like it always had. He stood still for a moment, taking everything in. The faded sofa, the hand-me-down bookshelf filled with children's books, the refrigerator covered in Emily's drawings, the framed photo on the entry table, a blurry image of Claire and a toddler at the zoo, both smiling, though the man beside them had been carefully cropped out. Michael's eyes eventually landed on Claire, and something shifted behind them. Recognition, certainly. Regret, possibly. Claire offered a small smile and motioned toward the couch. Would you like to sit? Michael nodded, walking past the hallway where Emily was already introducing her stuffed animals to her new friend, Mr. Bossman. They sat opposite each other, the air thick with silence. You look... well, Claire offered, even though she could see the exhaustion under his eyes. And you look like you've been fighting a war, Michael replied quietly. Claire gave a soft laugh, but her voice cracked at the end. Some days it feels like one. He studied her face, and suddenly the words from the letter came flooding back. Stage 4. Running out of time. I want to help, he said, the words coming faster than he expected. With Emily. With the treatments. All of it. Claire's eyes welled up. You don't have to. I want to, he interrupted. You should have told me, Claire. About her. About everything. I tried, Claire whispered. I left messages. Emails. Letters. I never got them. I figured that out. Eventually. But by then I thought you'd made your choice. Michael leaned back silent. The weight of those 8 missing years settled heavy between them. In the hallway they heard Emily giggle. Michael looked in her direction, then back at Claire. She's incredible, he said. She's the best thing I've ever done, Claire replied. And the hardest. Michael hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted him since he'd read the letter. Is she really mine? Claire nodded without hesitation. Yes, I was told years ago that I couldn't have children. Claire's eyes softened. Doctors are wrong sometimes. Michael stared down at his hands, processing that truth, trying to believe it. I want to do a test, he said finally. Not because I doubt you, but because, for her sake, legally, officially. I understand, Claire said, her voice steady. You can talk to Dr. Miller. He's trustworthy. He's always been kind to us. I know him, Michael replied, surprised. He's my personal physician. Their eyes met, and for a moment it felt like a door had cracked open. Michael stayed for dinner. Claire reheated a simple vegetable stew, and Emily insisted he sit beside her. She chattered non-stop about her school, her stuffed animals, and how Buddy, her tiny rescue dog, always tried to chase squirrels, even though he had no front teeth. Michael laughed more during that meal than he had in months, but across the table Claire watched him carefully. There was warmth in his smile, but caution in his eyes. She couldn't blame him, not after everything that had happened between them. Later that evening, after Emily had fallen asleep curled beside Buddy on the couch, Claire poured them each a cup of tea. Michael held his cup, but didn't drink. Claire, what happened back then? I need to understand. Why did we fall apart? Claire inhaled sharply. You got those pictures. You thought I was cheating on you. You were in them, with some guy. That guy was my cousin Ethan. We were planning a surprise for your birthday. The call you got telling you I was lying. That wasn't me. That wasn't real. Michael's face hardened. Victoria, Claire blinked. Victoria Hayes. She was working for me back then. She was always around when we fought. Always had answers. Always soothed things when we ended. Claire sat back, stunned. You think I know she tampered with something recently, he said. If she went that far now, maybe she went even further then. Claire looked down, her voice thick with emotion. So we lost everything because someone wanted to win. Michael didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. As he stood to leave, Claire touched his arm. She doesn't know how sick I am, she whispered. She knows something's wrong, but I haven't told her everything. I didn't want her to carry that weight. Michael looked toward the couch where Emily slept, Buddy curled against her. She shouldn't have to, he said. Then he did something that surprised them both. He bent down and kissed Claire's forehead. I'll be back tomorrow, he said, and we'll get that test done. As he closed the door behind him, Claire leaned against the frame and let herself cry, not because she was afraid, but because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, Michael stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment, his coffee untouched and cooling in his hand. The sunlight streamed in, illuminating the polished surfaces and designer furniture, but none of it felt right anymore. Not after last night. The silence in his apartment, once a refuge, now pressed in like a weight. All he could think about was the gentle hum of Claire's small home, the way Emily's laugh filled every room, the scent of lavender and stew lingering in the air. And the questions. So many questions. His phone buzzed. Dr. David Miller lab is ready. I cleared my schedule. Bring Emily by any time today. Michael replied with a quick on our way and grabbed his coat. But before he could walk out the door, the intercom chimed. It was Victoria. He paused for a beat, staring at the speaker. Michael, it's me, came, her voice smooth, composed, practiced. We need to talk. He didn't answer but opened the door. Victoria swept into the apartment wearing a deep navy pantsuit, every strand of her dark hair perfectly in place. But Michael noticed the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers clutched the strap of her designer bag, just a bit too tightly. I heard you cleared your entire schedule yesterday. She began walking past him like she still belonged in the space. What's going on? I don't owe you an explanation. No, you don't, she said, spinning to face him. But I deserve the truth. Michael crossed his arms. Funny, that's what I want too. Victoria narrowed her eyes. This is about her, isn't it? If by her you mean Claire Dawson. Yes. She gave a dry laugh. The ghost of your past. How poetic. She's not a ghost, Michael said coldly. She's the mother of my daughter. Victoria's mask faltered for just a split second. You can't be serious. We're doing a DNA test today, he said, to make it official. Victoria's lips parted in something between shock and panic. Michael, we talked about this years ago. You're sterile. You've accepted it. That's what I was told, he interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. But Claire swears Emily is mine. And the timing fits. The resemblance is undeniable. You can't let emotions cloud your judgment. He stepped closer. You were there back then, Victoria, always offering comfort, always ready with evidence that Claire had lied. Pictures, calls, witnesses. Why Victoria's expression froze. Are you accusing me of something? I'm asking a question. I helped you, she said through gritted teeth. I was the only one who stayed. I picked up the pieces when she broke you. You used those pieces to build a version of me you could control. Victoria's eyes flashed. Is that what you think this is? Control. I think you wanted me for yourself. And I think you'd do anything to keep me. Silence stretched between them. Then Victoria took a slow breath, smoothing her hair. You're being irrational. You're vulnerable. You're letting some child walk into your life and rewrite it. She's my child. Not until that test says so. Michael stepped back. I think you should leave. Victoria held her ground. And if the test says she isn't yours, then what? You just let them into your life, let her manipulate you again. I'd rather be manipulated by love, he said, than live another day surrounded by lies. Victoria stared at him, eyes burning with something deeper than anger. Then without another word she turned and left. The door clicked softly behind her. Michael stood still for a long moment, then picked up his phone and called Claire. We're ready, he said. I'll pick you up in 30. At the clinic, Dr. Miller welcomed them with a warm smile. He greeted Emily like an old friend, then guided them gently through the process. The cheek swabs were quick, painless. Emily was more fascinated than nervous. It's like magic, she exclaimed. You just swab and then you know if we match, Dr. Miller chuckled. Well, not instantly, but yes, it's a little like magic. Claire stood beside Michael, quieter than usual. What if... She started, then stopped. Michael turned toward her. I believe you, he said simply, but if the test says otherwise, then the test is wrong. She exhaled shakily. After the samples were sealed and sent to 2 independent labs, Dr. Miller walked them out with a promise. You'll have results in 48 hours, maybe sooner. Back in the SUV, Emily was unusually quiet, hugging Buddy on her lap as the city passed outside the window. Mr. Michael. If the test says you're not my dad, will you still come visit us? Michael's chest tightened. I'll always be here for you, he said, even if it's not magic. He reached back and squeezed her hand gently. Sweetheart, you're the magic. That evening, Michael sat on the edge of his bed, rereading Claire's letter for the 20th time. Everything inside him wanted to believe, but something didn't sit right. Not about Claire, but about Victoria. She had come undone too quickly, pushed too hard, and she knew about the test before he had told anyone. He reached for his phone and called Dr. Miller. "David," he said, "I need a favour." "What kind?" "A second set of eyes on the process. Lockdown security. Chain of custody. I want to make sure no one can touch those results." There was a pause. "I was already thinking the same thing," Dr. Miller said. "There's something about this. That feels off." Michael nodded, even though David couldn't see him. "Let's protect the truth," he said. "This time I want it all out in the open." And he meant it. Because if he had learned anything from Claire's silence, from Emily's courage, from 8 years of absence, it was this: the truth always finds its way home. The call came at 6:42 in the evening, just as Michael Turner was setting a plate of takeout Chinese food on the coffee table in Claire's apartment. Emily was cross-legged on the floor, attempting to feed Buddy a tiny spoonful of rice without spilling soy sauce on his ears. Claire sat curled in the corner of the couch, her face a little brighter today, colour slowly returning to her cheeks. Michael's phone buzzed against the table. It was Dr. Miller. He stood quickly, stepping into the small hallway for privacy. "Michael David," said, his voice low and measured. "The results are in. From both labs." Michael's pulse quickened. "And there's no question," David replied. "Emily is your daughter. The probability is 99.97%. Michael leaned against the wall, eyes closing, as a wave of emotion surged through him. Joy, relief, something deeper, harder to name, like finally finding a part of himself he hadn't known was missing. "She's mine," he whispered. "She is," David confirmed. "And that's not all." Michael straightened. "One of the labs flagged an anomaly," David continued. "Someone attempted to submit a second sample under your name. They used your patient ID, but the markers were completely different, likely meant to generate a false negative." Michael's blood ran cold. "Victoria," he said. "I can't prove that," David said carefully, "but I can tell you the timing lines up with the brief system outage we had. The backup logs show a login from an IP address linked to your office building." Michael didn't hesitate. "Secure everything," he said, "and call your lawyer." He ended the call, returned to the living room and looked at Claire. She knew something had changed. "It's her, isn't it?" she asked. He nodded. Claire covered her mouth with her hands, tears welling in her eyes. Emily looked up from the floor, confused. "Why are you crying, Mummy? Did the rice fall on the carpet again?" Claire laughed through her tears. "No, sweetheart. These are happy tears." Michael knelt beside Emily and looked into her bright blue eyes. "I have something important to tell you," he said. Emily tilted her head. "Is it about the test?" Michael smiled. "Yes. The test says I'm your dad." Emily blinked, then broke into the widest grin Michael had ever seen. "I knew it," she shouted, launching herself into his arms. "I knew it. You have my eyes and my nose. And you like soy sauce too." Claire laughed softly from the couch, wiping at her cheeks. "I told you," Emily added proudly. "It's magic." Michael held her tightly, whispering, "It really is." The next morning, Michael arrived at his office early, too early for most of his staff. The halls of Turner Technologies were quiet, but his mind was anything but. By 9:15 a.m., Victoria walked into the executive suite with her usual confident stride. She had no idea that everything had already begun to crumble. Michael waited until she was seated in the glass-walled conference room before entering with two men, his personal attorney and the firm's head of security. Victoria's smile faltered. "Michael, what is this? You tampered with medical evidence," he said calmly. "You committed fraud, possibly more." Her eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about? You faked a DNA sample under my name. You tried to make it look like Emily wasn't mine." "That's ridiculous. I have the lab logs," Michael cut in. "Security footage, digital trails, everything." Victoria stood abruptly, her chair screeching. "I was trying to protect you. That woman destroyed you once." "No," Michael said, voice firm. "You did. You orchestrated the breakup, the photos, the calls. You used your access to manipulate every part of my life. I saved you," she hissed. "You don't even realize what she was doing. You stole my daughter from me for 8 years. That silenced her. Michael nodded to his security chief. "Escort Ms. Hayes off the premises. Effective immediately." Victoria's mask shattered. "You're throwing away everything for them." Michael didn't answer. He didn't have to. As she was led out, Michael felt lighter. Later that day, his lawyer filed formal charges. Victoria would face the consequences. Maybe not all at once, but justice had begun. That evening, Michael returned to Claire's apartment carrying something far more important than takeout. He had stopped by a small jewellery shop on the corner of Newbury Street. Inside a velvet box was a simple silver ring flanked with 2 tiny sapphires, the same shade as Emily's eyes. Claire was folding laundry when he walked in. Emily was in the bedroom teaching Buddy how to sit using carrot sticks and intense concentration. "Hi, Claire," said smiling. "You're early." "I didn't want to wait," Michael replied. She looked up and noticed the box in his hand. Her breath caught. "I know this is sudden," he said, "and I know we've been through a hurricane of emotions, but I also know what I want." He opened the box. "I want you. I want Emily. I want the life we lost and the one we still have a chance to build." Claire stared at him, silent, overwhelmed. "Claire Dawson," he said, "will you marry me?" Tears rolled down her cheeks. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course." From the hallway, Emily called. "Did someone say yes?" Claire and Michael laughed. Emily came barreling in, saw the ring, and gasped. "Does this mean we get to be a real family now?" Michael knelt down and hugged her tight. "We already are," he said. "This just makes it official." Spring in Boston had finally bloomed into its full beauty. The trees along the Charles River shimmered with green leaves, daffodils danced in sidewalk planters, and the scent of new beginnings lingered in every soft breeze. In a small chapel tucked between old brownstones and ivy-covered walls, sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting soft colours across rows of wooden pews. It was here on a Saturday morning that felt like the first page of something brand new, that Michael Turner and Claire Dawson stood together side by side, hand in hand, vowing to never be apart again. Emily stood proudly between them, holding a bouquet nearly as big as her chest, her blue eyes shimmering with tears and joy. Her flower girl dress was the same colour as her eyes, and around her neck was a tiny locket that Michael had given her the night before. Inside was a photo of the 3 of them taken on their first trip to the Boston Public Garden. Michael's vows were simple but true. "I lost you once because I believed a lie. I'll never let that happen again. You are my home, Claire. You and Emily. Everything I've built means nothing without the two of you beside me. Claire, her voice trembling but full of love, replied, I spent years wondering if you hated me. But deep down, I always knew that love this strong doesn't vanish. It waits. Thank you for finding your way back to us. When the ceremony ended, Emily tugged at Michael's hand and whispered, Does this mean we get to be the Turners now? Michael smiled and nodded. Yes, it does, sweetheart. The reception was held on the rooftop of Michael's newly renovated penthouse. The once sterile, modern space had transformed into a warm, inviting home filled with photos, children's books, a playroom in the corner, and laughter in every room. Emily danced barefoot on the terrace, Buddy trotting behind her, in a tiny tuxedo vest someone had ordered online. Claire laughed as she watched them, her hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. The chemo had ended. The treatment had worked. The cancer was in remission. For the first time in years, the future felt real. That night, as stars blinked into view over the Boston skyline, Michael stood with Emily at the window, her hand in his. Do you remember the first day we met? She asked. I'll never forget it, he replied. You walked into my office and changed everything. She grinned. I was scared, but Mommy said the letter was important. It was the most important letter I ever read. Emily looked up at him. Are you happy now? Michael bent down and kissed the top of her head. I've never been happier. They stood like that for a long while, father and daughter, watching the lights dance on the river. And in the quiet of that perfect evening with the family he had once lost and finally found. Again Michael Turner knew something he had never dared believe before. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes they begin with a letter, a wrinkled envelope, and the courage of a little girl who refused to give up on her family. Today's story comes to an end, but its echo still lingers in the heart. What do you think? Give us a score from 1 to 10, and feel free to share a few words in the comments. Every voice here is valued and heard. Before you go, let me ask you gently, are you doing okay today? If your heart feels heavy, let this place be a quiet corner where you can share and find comfort. See you again in the next bedtime story, where love and hope remind us that no matter how dark the night may seem, kindness will always prevail.